New exclusive photographs, by far the best yet, are in from the Titanic.
Okay, Mirror 2, we're going over the bow. Stay with us.
The Titanic stands as a tragic reminder of the unforgiving power of the sea. As it lies at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean, it is almost as if every fabric of its existence is buried below with it. However, there are rare pictures of the ship that have been rarely seen by the public eye.
You won't find skeletons. The bones actually dissolve into solution very rapidly at that depth.
Join us as we uncover some of these forgotten photographs that offer a glimpse of one of the world's greatest ships in history. 1. Titanic construction. Like all other ships, the Titanic was propped on and surrounded by numerous craters. Like its two sister ocean liners, the RMS Olympic and HMHS Britannic, she was constructed by the Belfast shipbuilders Harland and Wolff in Ireland. By measurement, the Titanic was 882 feet and 9 inches long, 269.06 m, with a maximum breadth of 92 feet and 6 inches, 28.19 m. Looking at it by today's standards, that could equate to the distance of more than 4 city blocks in total. Its total height, measured from the base of the keel to the top of the bridge, was 104 feet, 32 m. In total, the ship weighed a whopping 46,000 tons, courtesy of its over 3 million rivets. The construction cost $7.5 million, which is over $200 million in present times with inflation. It began in 1909 and was completed in 3 years with the labor effort of some 3,000 workers. At the time, this was one of Belfast's biggest projects, but it is sad how much of it did not last a month on sea. 2. The Royal Maiden Ship, Titanic at the dock. While we have familiarized ourselves with images of the Titanic sailing at sea or sinking, there has been little publicity of the ship at the dock just before it embarked on its ill-fated maiden voyage days later. This picture portrays just that. In it is the picture of the Titanic resting on the shores of the sea at Belfast, Northern Ireland. It had ropes attached to it which were used to keep it steady at the dock. This relaxing picture is wholly devoid of the history-changing dread that soon befell the vessel nights later, 039 to 045. 3. The Titanic wreck. Of all the notable pictures of the Titanic, this one is by far the most iconic. After the sinking in 1912, numerous efforts were made to locate the vessel and perhaps, by some miracle, bring it up to the surface. However, as the years went by and the technology at the time failed to go down 12,000 feet in the Atlantic to locate the ship, all hopes of a clean retrieve were dashed in an instant. This changed, however, 73 years later in 1985, when American oceanographer and marine geologist Robert Ballard discovered the ship using his deep-diving submersibles Alvin and the early ROV Jason Jr., 3 o'clock to 3:06. The cameras attached to the vessels were only enough to reveal snapshots of the decaying ship. But in present times, with breakthroughs in technology, new and improved pieces of equipment that can be able to scan the whole ship to reveal a complete view of the Titanic have been created. With the new technology developed, the first scan was carried out in the summer of 2022 by Magellan Lieutenant, a deep-sea mapping company, and Atlantic Productions, who have been making a documentary about the project. The team pulled off this incredible feat by controlling the submersibles remotely from a specialist ship. Then they spent more than 200 hours surveying the length and breadth of the wreck, taking more than 700,000 images from every angle, and creating an exact 3D reconstruction of the vessel. With the images obtained from these scans, we can now get a clear view of the Titanic in real time, as opposed to the rough imagery we have depended on for years since its discovery. At the bottom of the sea, the Titanic lies in 2 parts, with the bow buried in one area and the stern buried some 2,600 feet, 800 meters away. Then the field surrounding the doomed vessel is practically a litter of debris from the disintegrated ship and components that were previously in the ship. 4. The giant propellers. Although images of the RMS Titanic have been widely circulated on the internet, the likeness of the giant propellers of the ship is seldom seen. Well, this is obviously because this part of the ship can be located at the bottom of the large vessel. For a long time, only the construction workers, as well as a few of the people who survived the sinking that night, were lucky enough to see this magnificent part of the ship. But thanks to timeless photography, images of the mighty propellers have been preserved to date for all to see. Proportionately, the propellers were just as huge as the ship itself. They were 3 in total, with 2 on either side of the base and 1 in the middle, and each of them had 3 blades. These propellers measured 23 feet and 6 inches and weighed a massive 38 tons each. They were made of bronze metal and each was powered by a separate engine, but sadly, none of its parts made it to the surface after the sinking. Only these pictures serve as the last proof of its architectural marvel. 5. Promenade deck. This was a first-class area on the A deck that was accessible via the grand staircase or the aft grand staircase. It encircled the whole A deck, and together with the middle part of the boat deck, constituted the outdoor space for only the first-class passengers to exercise, take strolls, and enjoy the sea air and view. The suites in the promenade deck sold for $4,000 in 1912, and this amounts to more than $120,000 today. Pictures of the area exist today thanks to photographer Francis Brown, who had boarded the ship and stayed in a cabin on the promenade deck. During his journey on the ship, he took dozens of photographs of life aboard the Titanic, and some of them featured the promenade deck. Brown then returned to Dublin after stopping at Queenstown. His presence on the ship is partly the reason we have a glimpse of the ship more than a century after the incident. 6. The Titanic leaving Belfast for Southampton. In this picture, the Titanic is noted to be leaving Belfast for its maiden voyage in 1912. Sailing before it is a small ship, and way behind it is another ship. The Titanic had a plume of black smoke billowing from one of its funnels, signifying its movement on the sea. It is estimated that the liner burned over 690 tons of coal per day, a testament to the very magnificence of the passenger vessel. This iconic image shows us the Titanic in action, and its simplicity hardly serves as any indication of the foreboding disaster that would occur some days later. 7. One of the propellers found underwater. The once stainless metal propellers of the Titanic were wiped off the face of the Earth after it landed 12,000 feet below the Atlantic Ocean. However, due to modern technology, we were able to locate only one of the propeller blades at the bottom of the ocean towards the end of the 20th century. The image of one of the Titanic's massive starboard propellers was seen through the round window of the Russian submersible Mir-2 during a 1991 expedition to the wreck site. The stern of the ship had landed forcefully aft and down, bending the 2 propeller wings up on impact, and this allowed the blades to be seen and photographed today. Although it is covered in the sediments of the ocean bottom, it is still pretty much visible and relatively intact. This is good, considering it is the only part of the propellers still visible at the murky depths of the Atlantic Ocean, while the other 3 propeller blades of the ship are completely buried in the seafloor. 0:54 to 1 o'clock. 8. The wrecked grand staircase. Today, there is no actual image of the grand staircase of the Titanic. The only thing that serves as a portrayal of this part of the ship prior to the sinking is the main staircase of the Olympic, the RMS Titanic's sister ocean liner. Now, all that remains of this area is located at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. To be able to get a clear grasp of the damage done to the Titanic's grand staircase, experts rely on the staircase of the Olympic. To this effect, the wreckage of the forward grand staircase has been extensively documented in photographs and videos, leaving an imprint of the magnificence of this grand space decades before it got ridden with sediments on the ocean floor. When the area was first explored by Dr. Robert Ballard using the submersible Alvin and the early ROV Jason Jr., the staircase was found, albeit in an unimaginably rough condition. What he had spotted was a mere skeleton of the former structure. The wrought iron balustrades and intricately cut woodwork were missing, and all that remained in their absence was a cavernous abyss, as the whole structure had all but collapsed. Then light fixtures from dangling wires covered in thick underwater sediments were hanging all over the place. It was a complete mess within. The good thing, however, was that the hole where the staircase used to be acted as a passageway to the ship's interior spaces for further exploration to go on, without causing much damage. 246 to 259. In the end, this remarkable but sad finding illuminated the part of the Titanic that was once bright, but had ultimately succumbed to the century-long forces of underwater decomposition. 9. The Marconi Communications Room. It is through this room and the efforts of all the operators who were in it at the time of the sinking that the RMS Carpathia was able to come to their rescue. The room had a variety of equipment which were housed in a series of interconnected compartments. First was the silent room, which was a soundproof compartment where noisy transmitting equipment was located. Then there was the Marconi room, an office that contained the operator's workstations, manipulation keys, and receiving equipment. Lastly, the room had a bedroom which served as the operator's sleeping quarters. The wireless set was operated by Marconi's employees who were, by routine, assigned to Titanic for the duration of one voyage. When the Titanic collided with the iceberg that night, a series of SOS signals were sent hundreds of miles across the North Atlantic. The broadcast was made possible due to the 1.5 kilowatts Marconi installation, which was the latest piece of modern technology at the time. This set was in absolute demand in Europe at that time and was also the natural expectation every communications compartment in ships was supposed to meet. At the time of the sinking, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride were the operators in charge of the Marconi suite, and they took it upon themselves to communicate their dire situation to other operators out at sea. This incredible wireless room helped save the lives of the survivors, and so did the brave operators who disregarded their own existence for the greater good. 10. The crew of the RMS Titanic. One of the iconic things about the Titanic was its commendable crew. Images of the ship's crew, particularly that of its captain, Edward Smith, in a grim display of bravery and servitude, it was reported that every one of the Titanic's engineers and crew stayed at their post, trying to save lives as the ship went down. Most notable among them were the operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride at the Marconi communications room, Captain Edward Smith, who had remained on board as the ship sank and was rumored to have gone down along with his ship like the captain he was, and the musicians who kept playing their music until they met their ends, 1 o'clock to 1:13. In addition, there was the engineering crew who had stayed at their posts to work the pumps while controlling flooding as much as possible. They had done this to ensure that power stayed on in the ship during the evacuation, and the wireless radio system was still online to keep sending distress calls. These people bravely kept at their work and helped save more than 700 people even if they knew it would cost them their own lives. Conclusively, these iconic pictures are a piece of memorial for these heroes, and even decades after their demise, they command the same level of respect they did back in 1912. 11. An underloaded lifeboat. Ordinarily, the lifeboats on the Titanic were slated to carry over 60 people. However, we can see in this picture how little the passengers were in this boat. Give or take, it must have had no less than 20 people on board. This is just a faint reminder of the mishandling of the evacuation that had ensued the night of the sinking by certain officials who were not properly trained to carry out this kind of drill. Some lifeboat launches were improperly executed and poorly supervised. As a result, the boats left with a little more than half of the total capacity it was capable of carrying. In the end, only 1,500 people did not make it to the lifeboat, and over 700 survivors made it till daybreak, when the RMS Carpathia arrived, 2:18 to 2:24. This picture is evidence of the bad decision-making that had cost a few people their lives that fateful night. Although not a lot of people would have been saved at the end of the day, the vast majority that would have preserved their lives, had some lifeboats been loaded with the right amount of passengers, would have made a difference, regardless. 12. The violin played by a band member. A violin that was believed to have belonged to Wallace Hartley, a bandmaster who had kept playing until the ship sank on the ill-fated maiden voyage, was retrieved from the sea. In 2013, it went on display in the Belfast City Hall for an auction. Wallace Hartley was one of the heroes who had initially, along with his other bandmates, been tasked with playing music to soothe the agitated passengers who scrambled about frantically as the ship sank. He had played until the very last minute, completely disregarding his own safety and life until the ship had disappeared completely out of view, along with the other musicians. It is reported that the last music they had played aboard the doomed vessel was "Nearer My God to Thee," before everywhere went eerily still. Further investigation into the musical instrument revealed that the violin, which was given to Hartley by his fiancée, Maria Robinson, in 1910, was estimated to have been made between 1880 and 1900. Wallace Hartley's body was recovered on the 25th of April, and the violin and the leather valise in which he had put the violin were strapped to his body before the ship sank. With this piece of information, there is no disputing the fact that he truly was the owner of the instrument. The monogrammed valise, still containing the violin, was discovered by Robinson's sister upon her death in 1939. And since then, it has been in the hands of a succession of private owners before the thought of auctioning it came to mind in 2013. The violin was sold for $1.7 million, making it one of the most, if not the most valuable artifact from the Titanic sinking. Now, the instrument serves as a triggering reminder of the harrowing sacrifice Wallace Hartley and his peers had made on the ship. And although he did not survive the incident, this piece of him perseveres to tell his story. 13. The gymnasium. Here is a fun fact not a lot of people know. The Titanic was the first ocean liner to ever have a gym in its compartments. From its exquisite setting, it is clear that this gym room was made especially for first-class passengers. It was a room where all the high-class passengers could go to work out whenever they wished, all for a small fee. The gymnasium was located on the ship's boat deck, near the grand staircase. Although it was made for the upper class, the builders kept things a little less grand and expensive. It had several pieces of equipment you would find in the average gym, such as stationary bikes, punching bags, rowing machines, and weights. Additionally, it had a machine called the electric camel, which was popular back then for its rumored ability to help the liver. Furthermore, in the gym room, the passengers exercised under the eye of the ship's physical instructor, Thomas Macaulay, who was described by a survivor as a ruddy-cheeked, spry little man who was clearly devoted to his job. He oversaw Titanic gym activities and helped people use the machines. The Titanic gym was only open to women from 9 a.m. to noon, and men could only use it from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Well, you can probably tell how this state-of-the-art room eventually came to a close, 231 to 237. Today, the Titanic gym has not been forgotten at all. In fact, there are even plans made since 2012 to build a new replica ship called Titanic II. It is inspired by the doomed vessel and would be furnished with all the amenities that were included in the original version. 14. The bathtub of Captain Smith. One of the most intriguing pictures of the Titanic is the picture of Captain Edward Smith's bathroom. First of all, you should note that these pictures are not of his bathroom before the sinking, but rather from the footage derived from the wreckage at the bottom of the sea. While all other furnishings in the ship were either too submerged in the ocean floor or just nowhere in sight, the bathtub of the captain was still visible in his quarters. The wreck is slowly decaying at its resting place, yet the porcelain bathtub, still intact regardless of the long descent from the surface, still sticks out like a sore thumb amid the grim environment. This bathroom remained visible for years, but sadly, a recent expedition in 2021 revealed that the roof of the officer quarters, which is the roof above Captain Smith's cabin, had collapsed and had almost covered the bath entirely. 15. One of the anchors found in 1985, when the wreckage of the Titanic was discovered, 1 out of the 3 anchors was found. The anchors were made by Noah Hingley and Sons Lieutenant, which happened to be one of the leading companies at the time, and the one that had made anchors for the White Star Shipping Company for the Olympic before. The anchor for the Titanic, however, was the largest they had made for what would be the largest ship in the world. The main anchor measured 18 feet and 6 inches in length and 10 feet 6 inches in width. When the wreckage of the Titanic was discovered, the main anchor was seen still fixed on the bow. Like the other parts of the ship, the anchor was covered in drapes of dregs from the ocean, 335 to 341. While it is Herculean to retrieve this part of the ship from the depths of the Atlantic, its pictures as well as the link to the anchor that still remains on land help to create the image of how huge this metal structure was and the role it had to play in the ship. In addition, a replica of the anchor, which was made in 2010, is also on public display in the Netherton Town Center. At least, spectators now have something to look at if they ever feel the need to understand the engineering of the RMS Titanic. 16. A megaphone that was allegedly used by Captain Edward Smith. Megaphones were supplied to the Titanic by the same company that made the whistles the officers used, J. Hudson and Company ACME whistles. It is believed that the megaphone was used by Captain Smith during the evacuation process. This trivial yet important scene is portrayed in James Cameron's 1997 blockbuster movie, Titanic, where Captain Smith, played by Bernard Hill, was seen using the megaphone to call out to lifeboats to come back and pick up more people. The megaphone was discovered on the sea floor with debris surrounding it. Then it was retrieved and put on display in a museum. Sadly, it has decomposed a lot more than it was on the seafloor, most probably due to exposure to air after spending years in water. 17. the life jackets used by passengers. Some of the survivors of the sinking attributed their luck to these life jackets. But while they were remarkable in doing their job of keeping the passengers afloat, it is speculated that they did more damage, especially to the passengers that were forced into the water, either when they jumped into it in the heat of the moment or when they were sandwiched with it by falling objects. Unlike the inflatable life jackets we have today, the ones worn by the passengers aboard the Titanic looked anything but safe. The life jackets were made of hard cork and canvas, so they were not entirely safe for those who were forced to jump into the water. Be that as it may, the life jackets were still instrumental in giving hope to the helpless passengers who were frantically searching for a way to get off the sinking vessel. There were over 3,000 of these life jackets available on the ship, which meant they were enough to go round and protect the 2,208 passengers and crew who were on board the RMS Titanic, even though the lifeboats were not enough to save them all. So you can imagine what little bit of comfort these life-saving accessories provided desperate passengers. Today, there are only 12 known of these RMS Titanic life jackets left in the world out of the 3,000 that were on board the ship, and 6 of them are on display at the Titanic Museum attraction in Pigeon Forge.